And it is now 4:15. So Jordan, Sharon, and then okay, and I saw Karen on the list. Okay, very good. Well, welcome everyone to our June 8th work session part 1. We have just some really important information. I want to thank so much for Tim and Dr. McCall to lead us in this conversation. But just quickly before we get started, and their team that will be certainly sharing their perspectives as well, I'm going to run through who is participating in the work session. Then I will hand it over to Dr. McCall to kick us off. So welcome Amanda Morris, Amber Fields, Ben Bowman, Carol Kinch, David Moore, Margie Green, and they are moving, so that's not good. Gigi Giselle Escobar, Jarvis Gomez, Jill Zertsmead, Jordan Mills, Karen Emerson, Lisa Hasuku, Lisa McCall, Octavia Horn, Patty Roberts, Paul, I need to learn how to say your last name correctly, but Verstrade?
Verstrate. Much easier than it's spelled.
I will phonetically remember that. Verstrate, thank you. Rob Parness, Rory Moore, Sharon Fox, Susan Bernard. Susan's with us twice. Dr. Sue, Tim Blackburn, Tim Manley, Todd Robson, Tracy Rose, Veronica Aguilar, Zinnia, and Zinnia is also with us twice. Okay, that is it. Welcome, everyone. Truly appreciate you all being here this evening. And with that, I will hand over to Dr. McCall. Oh, Dr. McCall, you're on mute. Oh, she's still not hearing me.
Can you hear me? I'll start again. Good evening, Board Chair Wolf, board members and directors and others. So this, what we want to share with you in this first session is really, we want to share with you the state of our students as they have had distance learning, and we want to focus on what we've learned around social emotional learning, and also instruction and distance learning, and the impact that it's had on our historically underserved and underrepresented students. And we have with you folks from the teams, the different teams that I would like to, in 3 parts, we're gonna share about our English language learners and our emerging bilinguals, students with IEPs, and then also we're going to give you a review of the elementary levels, engagement, and participation. And so we're going to start with Tim, and Mandy is going to share with you around our state of our English language learners. And I'm going to turn it over to Tim.
Thank you very much, Dr. McCall, Chair Wolf, and our board. Thank you for this opportunity to connect with you. Friends, I just have some information to share with you, about our multilingual students, and our colleague Mandy Morris is going to also co-present with me. But really, there are 3 things we would like to share about our multilingual students insofar as social emotional learning, educational need, academic achievement, and then we'll conclude on a discussion of next steps. So we preface this all by saying that it's really thanks to our English learner specialists that we have all of this very rich qualitative feedback for what's going on K-5, and so I would be remiss by neglecting to thank them for that. But what I should also share is that there's a lot that we don't yet know about our student perspective, and so it's important to couch that what we have to share with you is very much from the perspective of our EL specialists, and we have a lot more that we need to learn from our students. That said, I'd like just to share a little bit about our technical infrastructure. It's kind of hard to imagine where we would be without our one-to-one student to devices, as well as having a wonderful platform in Seesaw. English learner specialists actually reported that they were really able to check in and interact with their students, provide very individualized feedback through the Seesaw platform. And while imperfect, the glass half full of this is that our colleagues were able to check in with their students on more of a one-on-one basis. But the imperfect side of that is that not everyone is able to meaningfully access all of the activities. And so that's what we have to share with you insofar as our students' social emotional learning is a lot left to learn, but again, we're well positioned to at least present tasks and check in with our students. If we could please move on to the next slide. So, moving on here, participation seemed to be a really critical barrier at first. There was a lot of anxiety from our colleagues around when we first surveyed them in the kind of the initial days of quarantine back in the end of March, early April. And what we found is that over time, through some really deliberate outreach from our EL specialists, from our classified staff, and through our basic needs teams, is that participation steadily improved. So, what we came to learn is that, despite some of those early hiccups, that participation did improve. So much so that some colleagues actually reported that parents were saying they were a little overwhelmed with all the love and communication that we were sharing with them. All right, if we could please move on to the next slide. Thank you. And so what we came to learn is that there are some hidden opportunities here insofar as teacher and specialist collaboration. Many of our colleagues reported that it sure would be great to be able to collaborate more with classroom teachers, because from the student perspective, it's unclear what is kind of mandatory learning, so to speak, and what is optional. Kind of having to negotiate multiple online platforms, which I think from a K-5 perspective for young students, that could be pretty confounding. And so you'll actually note on the bottom bullet in particular that despite all of the positives that we could find in the value of collaboration and co-teaching, there's a caveat, and when colleagues are co-teaching in multiple classrooms, it can be pretty overwhelming. So if you would like to learn, to see more about actual data insofar as academic achievement, I really urge you to look at some of the participation data that our colleague Paul Verstraete has shared with us. It's pretty glaring. You can actually see a gap insofar as incomplete tasks that's very, very clearly defined between our language learner students and our general population. So there seems to be a barrier there. It doesn't necessarily speak specifically to academic achievement, but it does make one wonder about access. And if we could please proceed on to the next slide, Manny's going to walk us through a discussion of next steps.
Hey, Tim, I have a quick question for you while she's getting set up.
Yeah, thank you.
I looked at the data set, and I just wanted to clarify. So the data set is over time, but you said it did improve. Do you think the data set is reflective of, say, the end of the year, as opposed to just reflect the entire
The data, insofar as incomplete tasks, that's it's very much a snapshot in time, as Paul would remind us, is that's really over a week's worth of time. And I know that Paul could actually share, further snapshots, but that was the one I had most readily available.
Okay. Thank you.
Y'all good, Mandy? Okay.
Yeah, I was on mute. I was saying hi to everybody and thank you for having us. So you'll see here we have a couple, a bullet point that is specifically about 612, and we're very excited to come back with you guys. I believe it's June 22nd to talk specifically around 612. But there was coherence in our feedback from K through 12 ELD specialists, which informs our thoughts in moving forward. And it was so aligned that it made sense to include both K-5 and 6 through 12 here together. Tim and I had, from the very first week of school closure, we met with K through 5 ELD specialists in a weekly connect and 6 through 12 ELD specialists in a separate weekly connect. And those were hour-long meetings where we were able to get feedback from ELD specialists and what they were hearing from families and from students. And we did cycles of using that feedback to inform instruction and inform family connectivity, and then coming back together, reviewing our feedback, and then informing our forward work. And we set ourselves up without realizing that we were going to have hybrid distance learning again next year, but we really set ourselves up into this cycle that positioned us well to be able, towards the end of the year, to have a lot of really incredible feedback cycles and have all of that collected in Google documents, but also in Padlets. So we were able to find a lot of themes that came from our K through 12 teachers and see what themes really floated and what themes sunk, so to speak. And this, when we think about our next steps, I just wanted to fill you in. This is where that information is coming from. It's all of these cycles of feedback, of listening and then acting, and listening and acting. So on family focus groups in phase 4, we really want to connect with our families and hear more of our student voice. Like Tim started with, what we have, the data that we're sharing with you is through the lens of our ELD specialists. So their experience, what they've heard from parents, what they've heard from students. There is, you'll see that third bullet point is really bold. There was just broad agreement, K through 12, that we need to enhance collaboration. Too many barriers in accessing their core and content classes. So Tim and I did a professional development, the May 11th, I believe it was, with all of our middle schools. We collaborated with our middle school coaches, and we were talking really about organization for access. So how do we organize ourselves as core and content teachers in order to enable our ELs to access the important stuff, the content? And what does that look like in distance learning? So trying to take down barriers that are preventing our ELs from having success in their core content classes. So for K through 5, recommendations include collaboration with core content grade level teachers. So that was just universal from all of our ELD specialists. We have to have greater, instead of this like standalone designated ELD experience, we need ELD to be aligned, collaborated, in sync with the grade level teacher, the core content class teacher, in order for our ELs to find success, especially in hybrid distance learning. Programmatic agreements, so that's going back to that idea of the integrated ELD. So how do we layer ELP standards into our core content classes to help our students have success? And online learning tools like Imagine Learning. The caveat here, we have a partnership with Imagine Learning, and we've been looking into expanding that partnership. We're currently at 3 schools, and this is a potential platform to support a really specific profile of English learner in our elementary schools specifically. So looking at kindergarten, first grade students, beginner, early intermediate language level. So really kind of starting to explore what kind of additional supports could we use to support ELs moving into hybrid and distance learning. I know we're running out of time, so I'll just leave 612 for when we come back together June 22nd, but you'll see that those recommendations are very closely aligned with the recommendations that are coming out for K-5. Thank you.
So
3 minutes for questions.
Yeah, questions from the board. Thanks, Tim and Mandy.
No, you guys, so thank you all, first of all. And this might take too long, so maybe this might be part of a June 22nd conversation. Mandy, I love this idea. I'm just curious to maybe learn a little bit more about, so if we're trying to integrate mainstream and we have this tool, Imagine Learning, that's really going to help, how do you bring those pieces together? And the feedback from the mainstream teachers on how you build collaboration and integrate that in the classroom. That's probably not answered in the next 2 minutes that you have, but maybe for for you guys, when you come back, I would love to understand that more deeply on how you see that maybe, rolling out, because clearly hybrid is going to be part of the conversation in the fall. So with that, I'll stop and I'll defer to my fellow board members if they have other questions.
So I'm just curious if you think this this tool has use beyond the time of quarantine. Let's say once we get kids back into the building, would we be using the same tools then, or would we need to be switching gears again to a different tool set?
Great question.
Yes, we are currently using Imagine Learning in 3 of our elementary schools. This is our second year that we've been using it we have 78 licenses, just to give you an idea. So it's a pretty small number of licenses that we have. And this is absolutely a program of support that can be used in hybrid distance learning and also in brick and mortar learning. We have schools that are very familiar with Imagine Learning, and rolling it out for them is, they're already lock and pace. And then we have other schools who haven't used it quite as much. So of course there would be training around implementing it. But in short, yes, it is something that could be used coming back. And I just do want to emphasize that we are thinking about really a specific group of English learners, not broadly for all English learners across K-5.
Thank you. So for our next report is around participation. And so I've invited 2 of our elementary distance learning leads, Jordan Mills and Rory Moore, to share with you. Last time we met as the board, you had an opportunity to hear a little bit about the middle level. And so we wanted to share with you data around elementary. And this is an opportunity for you to ask questions. And so I'm going to turn it over to Jordan.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for inviting us to share today. I'll just start off by telling you a little bit about our process in elementary and what we've learned through all of the work that we've started so far with distance learning. Just speaking specifically about Bridgeport, I think the other elementary schools have, I know they've been really similar in terms of their processes. We have been collecting weekly the names of children that hadn't been participating at all, and also those that were doing less than half the work. And what we found is that by being really sort of relentless, very lovingly relentless in our pursuit of participation and engagement with our students, that it increased, continuing all the way up through the last week of school. And you'll see in the data, we had great, just really good luck getting in touch with everybody, and we're able to involve all of our students. But what we found is that we've got this group of students that while they are accessing sometimes and they are doing some of the work, it was still consistently less than half of the work. And so that's the group of students that we were really, really focused on at Bridgeport in terms of trying to get to the bottom of how we can get them more actively engaged, because we know that they've got Wi-Fi, we know that they've got devices, we know that they are able to do some of the work, but they're not doing all of it. So we started doing some empathy interviews with that particular group of students, which was, we're seeing consistently around 70-ish students weekly that were falling into that category. And this is some of the stuff that we heard them say, some of quotes from parents, actually, and I do have some student quotes too that I should share with you at some point because they're really fun. But really talking about some challenges as we're going through and analyzing this data. We're putting it into categories and coming up with some ideas for how we might address it next year. Some of the things that we're hearing are things like managing student behavior and managing student time is just really challenging for families at home. And as a mother of two, I can relate to that completely. Also, just talking about some of the external challenges that have to do with schedules, that's coming up a lot. And then really families' familiarity with technology being a real challenge for folks. Additionally, sometimes families feeling embarrassed. There's a real theme of kind of shame or worry that they're being judged, or guilt that they're not serving their students in the way that they should. So we'll work on continuing to process all of that data and coming up with some themes. But those are some of the, that's really the, sort of the target group for us right now, is to figure out how to get those families who are able to access to consistently participate. Next slide, please.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me here. Jordan was talking about some of the qualitative data, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about the quantitative data. So we have two ways primarily of tracking how or whether or not kids are doing the work and engaging with the work. The first is Scoresby data, which teachers fill out on Fridays, which they can also continue to fill out over the weekend on Mondays, just saying whether or not students engaged in any task at all, which would make them contact, which means they participated. So that's done by our homeroom teachers. If they don't hear from a student, if they don't get any evidence of a completed product, then they mark no contact, which means they didn't engage academically, and it says academically or otherwise on the slide. And the range of what could be engagement is pretty significant. It could be a conversation with a parent who's working with a student on a specific task, or it could be something that is turned in on Seesaw, or it could be just a conversation with a student and a parent, or excuse me, a student and a teacher. The other way that we're able to track data is by looking at Seesaw and just seeing just straight out whether or not kids are turning things in. And that engagement is very helpful. It's really easy to look in there and see it. We do have a lot of 4th and 5th grade teachers across the district who are not using Seesaw because they have been using Google Classroom since the start of the school year. And part of our guidance around distance learning was to make sure that teachers and students were using the formats that they were comfortable with, so they weren't learning something new. We didn't want students to be learning and parents to be learning how to use Seesaw for the very first time when they were at home, dealing with and managing all the things that were happening due to our current reality. So we wanted them to be doing things that they were comfortable with. Obviously, there's some flaws in both ways of tracking data. If we could go to the next slide. Our preliminary data is not completely reliable because of the Google Classroom piece. Every school has a handful. Alberta Ryder has 5 teachers that use Google Classroom. They do use Seesaw, but not to the same degree. That's pretty common throughout our 10 elementary schools. Our teachers are still learning these systems, and some of the data we can't verify because it's a teacher impression based on a conversation or something that a teacher knows. It could be a student who's working on a packet at home, a paper packet that we brought them one way or another, and the teacher is just aware that they're completing it. So because the range involves multiple sources and considerations, we are able to know the max that the students that are participating and the minimum per building. So on the next slide, you have every elementary school listed alphabetically, and based on the fact that we have teachers saying that kids are doing work, we have Seesaw data that can validate that, and then we have students that or teachers are saying are not doing work, and we have no Seesaw data to validate it. It's easy to get a basement number. So at 88% Alberta Ryder, at minimum 88% of our kids are engaging. But because of that number where teachers are marking that they are participating, but we don't necessarily have verification in Seesaw, the maximum amount that we could have participating is 97.5%. And so you guys can see the range for all elementary schools in our district. At worst case scenario, and this was the week of May 25th through May 29th, 88.9% of all elementary students in Tigard-Tualatin are engaging on some level, whereas 96% could be the highest. So those are the slides that I have. Oh, Jordan, are you going to come back and talk about?
Yes, I'm right here, and there's just a couple more slides that will be really brief. we could go to the next slide, just to show you our data. This is elementary data by race and ethnicity, and we have those same ranges. And so really, couple significant points here, but I draw your attention to the bottom line, the Pacific Islander participation. That is quite obviously our greatest area for growth in terms of serving our students. And the rest is fairly self-explanatory. On the next slide, I believe we have our ELL data. And so we have our active English learners, that is that top range. And then our monitored group, which means they used to be English learners, but they passed the ELPA test. That is much higher than our active English learners, and yet still just slightly lower in all likelihood of our students than our students who are not English learners. And on the very last slide is our special education data. And we can see that there's obviously a gap there between our students with IEPs and those that do not have IEPs. And so that is also another huge area for growth for us. And that is all we have in terms of elementary data for you today.
Okay, Zinnia, thank you. So board members, I'll let you start. Questions?
I have a question. I'm curious, so Jordan, I really appreciated that qualitative data that you provided with some of those quotes from parents. I'm curious if you've been able to do any sort of sense making or grouping of what those major causes or themes are. I know it's so case by case, but if there's any way to sort of grapple with what the themes were, if that could provide some input, direction for how we could address it.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're doing right now. That's a great question. That's precisely what we're doing right now is we've been finishing up those interviews. And so we're putting them into categories. And then our teams have been talking a lot about what are the areas that we can most influence and what are the things that we can control also as educators. And so looking at whatever those problems are, which are the ones that we can address the best, and starting to talk about some potential change ideas and pilot some ideas next fall to see what sticks and what works.
That's awesome. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And we'll update you guys at some point on what those themes are once we finish processing all that data.
And Jordan, I've missed. You said this was which week did you say this is? Is this May?
This was the 22nd,
25th to 29th.
25th.
Okay, so fairly recent. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was really interesting to watch how we had even more families participating and getting on board up until just this last week, families that we hadn't had success with up until just recently.
So Jordan, am I hearing you say that participation has been increasing since the shutdown began fairly consistently?
In terms of the number of families that we've been reaching, yes. I'd have to look to see when it comes to incomplete assignments, like are students doing more work than they were doing before. That I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, but the number of students that are participating has significantly increased over the course of the weeks. Yeah, consistently up.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And Jordan, just to tag along that, what do you attribute? I know because Tim said the same thing with English language learners. So what do you have any ideas? Is it just getting the modems out and all the IT work that's been done?
I think that here's my impression in our interviewing of families. It's actually our families have access to Wi-Fi. We have only three families at Bridgeport that, in fact, legitimately can't get on their iPads because of where they live. They can't get Wi-Fi no matter what we give them, and so we have an alternative plan for them, and they're engaging. It comes down to really the family's comfort level with technology is one of the most common things when it comes to our English learners, and we have some amazing folks on our basic needs team who speak Spanish very well, bilingual, bicultural folks who are really connecting with our families and finding a real gap in comfort level with using the technology. So that's a big piece of it. But it's some of those other themes too seem to be be popping up. And when I talk about that group of 70, 80 families that are able to physically access things but are not engaging on a regular basis, I'd have to go through and exactly crunch the numbers. But my impression is that many of them are English learners also. So there's some technology literacy things and a few other things, a few other themes too around comfort and access to the material itself, not physical access to technology, if that makes sense. So there's kind of two different kinds of access that we're discussing.
Okay, thank you for those insights.
So thank you, Jordan, Rory, and also would like to thank Paul, who is our district assessment coordinator, who's been mining the data, so to speak, and getting this information to our team as well as our other elementary principals who are constantly, like all of our administrators and our teams, assessing our students' current reality and accessing distance learning. And now I'd like to transition to Director Carol Kinch as she shares with us parent voices through around special education. Director Kinch.
Good evening, everybody. So for you today, I've prepared a sampling of information. We specifically did what you might call empathy interviews for our parents, our families, of students with the most impactful disabilities. So typically that would be a student with autism, intellectual disability, maybe other health impairment, because kids with disabilities have a wide range, but we know that there are some students that we have been very worried about, especially as we plan for continuing in a hybrid model. So we actually made phone calls, and I picked out some of the quotes for you. And so there were a variety of questions. One parent asking what was helpful says, also the hug sheets. Hugs are check-in, check-out behavior monitoring. Template was helpful for keeping my sons on a behavior plan, weekly assignment grid for my son's teachers, and weekly check-ins for my son's teachers, instructional aide, and learning specialist. The next one, I'm very concerned about a new routine and set of expectation. My daughter thrives on predictability. So we all do, but times 10, 20 for a student who has autism in particular, but for many students with disabilities. Holding the student-teacher expectation to a level everyone understands, not different for every teacher expecting different things. Whoever's driving can go to the next slide. I have 2 special need kiddos in the district, and without their case managers, we would have been absolutely lost. They have been and are what I would consider the most valuable assets to my children's education. Feeling of partnership with many of the teachers was great. Another area of concern where Google meets. There seemed to be a little actual direction, little actual teaching, not much actual structure, and having 3 kids in my house, differing meetings, times, changes, and not much structure was difficult and really not helpful. And one more, and then I'll share with you the themes. And I think this is an important one as we think about going back into brick and mortar, because this came up a lot. She needs to be able to move, play, and be outside. She needs to be social with friends. I hope that the adults in the building remember that they are children who are impulsive and won't necessarily adapt as quickly as needed. I worry that grace and understanding won't be given freely as the kids try and figure out how to move in a space that was once comfortable and predictable and now looks very different. So and you can go on to the next slide, we have surveyed our learning specialist assistants, most of which are connecting with individual families and students. And we've also do weekly meetings with our learning specialists. So this is a combination of feedback from families, learning specialist assistants. And you'll notice I use the word predictable 3 times. There were other families and the other quotes, but the idea of having a predictable structure and schedule came up over and over again. so that teachers weren't, they didn't have to refresh their email so they could set up a day. Remember, for this population of students, the parents become the teachers. So as much as we can help them. They also mentioned the importance of technology platforms and programs being predictable so that they weren't trying to figure them all out themselves and navigating multiple systems. Instruction that's accessible. So that means at their instructional level and something that the kids can do, that not only the kids also told us they need it accessible, but they also need it to be interesting and relevant. We have to up our game when it comes to giving students choice and giving them some choice around what's interesting to them. We have to up our game a little bit. And a strong need for connection, relationship, compassion, and understanding. And that's a little bit of a combination of two ideas. But I work with a middle school specialist, and I keep hearing over and over again that students are showing up to Google Hangouts, but they're not handing in the work. So they may not have shown up as someone who's completed the work, but they're coming to the Google Hangout. So that tells us something about the importance of our relationships with our students. And the compassion and understanding, I don't think we had really thought that this would be a theme coming out of it, but what that last parent said is they're very worried that in social distancing, mask wearing world, we are going to have to be strict and that their student will be punished if they don't maintain that 6 feet distance. And of course, we are not planning on doing that. We also have students who are afraid of people in masks, a lot of students, actually, more than I realized. So we have a lot of learning to do around mask wearing. We won't require students to wear the masks, but we have some students who, if they cannot read people's face, that is going to be a very scary place for them. So that compassion and understanding is going to be really important. And then, of course, for this population, social emotional learning is always at the top of our priority list. So that's what I have for you today.
So you guys, I'll jump in real quick. So Carol, based on what you said, and I have to admit, first of all, thank you all, right? Thank you all for just literally getting, shoved off, a roof of a school and like, go figure this out right now, go build everything, and we're going to change it again, go build it, go engage. So I want to, recognize all that and the amazing work that you've all done. So thank you for that. The two things, the one thing that I wonder about, maybe we can talk more about this in a couple weeks, is what does participation actually mean, right? I mean, I think about what is participation in brick and mortar, and we have absenteeism, sure, but you've got kiddos in classrooms learning and engaging in a normal way, and now we're measuring participation, but I feel like there needs to be a handicap, right? That actually says this is the value of what they're getting. And the reason I say that, and I wanted to say thank you first, is because I authentically, genuinely believe that everyone is doing, 100%. But I'm thinking about what does September look like and where our students are in preparation of the year ahead. So I don't expect an answer to that, but hopefully we can dig in a little bit more as we meet in June. And the other thing, Carol, that I'm thinking about is that as I think about Colt Gill's slide of are you going to be brick and mortar ready, and here's all the things you have to do, can we meet some of the statements that you just said and be COVID ready for students in terms of who wears masks or who doesn't, how we engage in a classroom? So my head is racing, so I feel like I just kind of went bleh, and so I apologize for that. But those are all the things that are kind of heavy on my heart and my mind right now. So anyway, Jill, Karen, yeah.
Well, let me respond to that a little bit, and we don't have time to talk about it today, but we are planning extended school year, which is a part of special education that is required for students who will regress and won't be able to recoup. And our team felt strongly, as do I, that continuing distance learning that hasn't really worked really well for this population didn't make a lot of sense. And so we were going to do everything in our power to figure out a way to make brick and mortar work for extended school year. And of course, that means a lot of collaboration with
David Moore and Darren and Jeff Smoke, and we had our final meeting and said, can we make this work? And so I have some details for you, but we're close to saying we can. And we have protective gear for our staff, and so we're there. We want to make it work.
I'm really glad to hear you say that, Carol, because as you were listing off all of the concerns that parents were having, the one that I'm thinking from my own experience is those parents need respite from those kids. If their mom and teacher for a hard needs kid, that's a heavy lift. And so I'm really glad to hear that the extended year can be in person. That will be a huge relief for those parents.
Yeah, and we actually surveyed. This is a good piece of information. We called each parent, and about 90% said they would prefer brick and mortar, because we didn't want to plan if many parents said, no, we're not ready. So we said, okay, we're going to do everything we can to make it work. And we're going to teach a lot of hand washing and social distancing.
Good luck with that.
Got to start somewhere.
Can I add to that this opportunity to share our current state as our teams are learning while they're also implementing distance learning for all, what are the gaps? And through that learning and making adjustments, it's definitely giving us some critical feedback from different stakeholders, multiple perspectives of what we need to be thinking about as we shift and start our planning for reopening our schools. And again, the reality is that not all of our students have had equitable access to distance learning. We need to pay considerable attention to those students that we are not engaging in a way that we need to. And so again, we shared this with you, which then we're transitioning to our second session, and again, assessing and talking about what's our current reality. So thank you for allowing us to share this.
Thank you, Dr. McCall, very much so. And I will say, according to my Surface Pro, I have 457. And so I'm going to honor a 5 o'clock start just for, there was some guests that were invited to our hate speech work session that might be jumping on. So in the 2 minutes that we have, Rory, Jordan, Mandy, just really appreciate Paul, Tim, all of you being here. And again, I can't thank you enough for the really heavy lifting that you're doing now and will continue as we try to figure out what 2021 is going to look like. And again, the data, I so appreciate, as Ben said earlier, just the feedback that you're getting and the ideas of how we do this differently. And one of the things I loved actually was the idea for tutorials for parents, right? To kind of have time and reflection are those, and I think, Mandy, that you even referenced that. How do you help parents understand, how to maneuver through some of these tools and maybe help their students? And then the one mother that said, I work 10 hours a day, I can't do this. And it just sits with you. And so I know that there's a lot ahead of us, but I just wanted to say thank you again. So, and again, open it up to board members if they want to say anything before we transition.
Can I just share one thing also, is that we've had some opportunities to hear a little bit from, I think you've seen some data from the middle school. We did an elementary level focus this time. Next meeting will be focused on high school data, and Amber and her team will be sharing their level data. So just a heads up about what to expect next time, as well as some more. We also had our BECs and our equity leadership team connect with affinity and alliance groups to share their experience as well. So they'll also have some qualitative data to share about the experiences of distance learning.
Wow. Zinnia, thank you. I am just really grateful that we get to get this kind of real-time feedback of how things are going. And again, Paul, if you're still on, thank you for the data collection to give some of us quantitative types of visual of how our students are engaging. So, okay. Well, with that, it is 5 o'clock, and we are going to transition into our second work session around our resolution that is ahead of us. I want to, before we get started, I just want to say a couple things, and then I want to acknowledge who is in the room, and then we're going to start with Art of Community. This past week, as in many weeks prior, I want to honor that it's well beyond just this past week, has been highly charged, very emotional, and this work, I'm so grateful for the students that brought their passion forward, for the district leadership team that took their experience and their depth of work over the last couple years and brought this together to get where we are tonight. And I just want to ensure that we all respect and appreciate where everyone is coming from. And I will be honest, and as a white woman, this is difficult for me to lead this conversation. But it is so critical for all of us, and I just so appreciate you all being here, ready to engage for what's best for our community and our students, and that we do the right work. So with that, I'm going to go through the list quickly to acknowledge all that are here to participate, and then we're going to start with the Art of Community and continue with the resolution. So Abdi, and I know Abdi, I should know how to pronounce your first name correctly, and I probably won't do that correctly. But Abdi is so kind to always welcome people to call him that. Mohammed Alfonso Ramirez, Amber Fields, Ben Bowman, Carol Kinch, Darren Bernard, David Moore, Deborah Ebert, Margie Green, Matt Kingsley, Gigi Escobar, Jarvis Gomez, Jill Zertsmead, Jose Reverte, Karen Emerson, Kabi Shrestha. Kabi, I should know how to say your last name, Shrestha. And please correct me if I said that wrong. Lisa Hasuki, Lisa McCall, Matt Brown, Octavia Horn, Patty Roberts, Rob Harness, Sarah Gentry, Scott Heron, Sharon Fox, Susan Bernard, Susan Ricci, Tim Manley, Todd Robson, Tracy Rose, Veronica Aguilar, Zinnia. So with that, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to use my phone. I'm going to give 30 seconds for all of us to reflect on the Art of Community. It is a protocol that we've used in our board meetings, and I have to admit, as we've gone to the Zoom meetings, we have not stated it, and we need to return to that process. Tonight, this is how we're going to start. I want all of you that expect to participate in this work session to share one of these items that you are going to commit to this evening as we walk through this work. So again, I'm going to give 30 seconds for you to remind yourself of what the protocol states. And if you plan to participate, do a shout out. I know this might be clumsy as we all try to share them, but I think it's really important that we all take this opportunity to say where we are before we start on this process. So with that, please just read through the community and then we'll get started in 30 seconds. Okay, I'll start. When we slow down, so we have time to think and reflect.
We recognize that we need each other's help to become better listeners.
We strive to be in community with one another with care.
We expect it to get messy at times. Go ahead, Gigi, sorry.
We will listen with intention to learn something new.
We will expect it to get messy at times.
We acknowledge that we bring our lived experiences into our conversations.
I'm going to listen with the intention of learning something new.
We try to stay curious about each other.
We acknowledge that we bring our lived experience into our conversations.
We remember that conversation is the natural way we think together.
We slow down so we have time and reflect.
We acknowledge that we bring our lived experiences into our conversations.
We slow down so we have time to think and reflect.
We will listen with intention to learn something new.
We acknowledge that we bring our lived experiences into our conversations.
We recognize that we need each other's help to become better listeners.
We strive to be in community with one another with care.
We expect it to get messy at times, and I think that explains the last couple of weeks.
We will listen with intention to learn something new.
We acknowledge that we bring our lived experiences into our conversations.
We expect it to get messy at times.
We strive to be in community with one another with care.
We recognize that we need each other's help to become better listeners.
We will listen with intention to learn something new.
We strive to be in community with one another with care.
We acknowledge that we bring our lived experiences into our conversation.
Conversation is a natural way we think and learn together.
We slow down so we have time to think and reflect.
We try to stay curious about each other.
We expect it to get messy at times.
Okay, did we get everyone? All right, thank you all, truly. And thank you for your grace and patience with me as well. So Ben, I'm going to hand it over to you and the students, and we'll move to the resolution and kind of the background and the reading. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. So I will just briefly answer a couple of the questions that Maureen laid out in the work session agenda items, and then we can go from there. So first, the question of what is a resolution? At its most simple explanation, a resolution is an official statement from the school board. It's not a solution to all the problems that we are going to discuss. It's not a change to any existing policy, although this particular resolution does commit to making a change in our existing policy. It doesn't provide any new resources to the district, but it is a public declaration and commitment to be better and an acknowledgement of our own responsibility here. And importantly, it sets the direction for the district and it provides something for which we can be held accountable. So where have we come from? Speaking personally, I graduated from Tualatin High School in 2010, and I know that racism, both systemic and explicit, and hate speech was present then, and I imagine it's been present since the beginning of our school district. Over the last year, however, the board has engaged in listening sessions that came about, frankly, because students of color and parents of color were very forthright about the experiences that they were having in the halls of our schools. And then in February, the board produced a statement on hate speech that you can review in the board packet. Maureen's included it there so you can see kind of where we left this conversation off with some benchmarks prior to COVID-19 sort of changing everything. And now, of course, we're living through what I can only explain as a transformational moment and an opportunity. I hope, I think we all hope, that will be the greatest shift towards racial justice since at least the civil rights movement. And I think it's changed a lot of our perspectives and opened a lot of our eyes to new things and new ideas that we hadn't considered before. So with that, the last question was, what do we hope to accomplish? And I wanted to provide space to some student leaders who've been instrumental in this resolution and in a petition that you may have seen circulating that I think is up to over 1,300 signatures now regarding hate speech in our district. So with that, I will hand it over to the students, and I believe Tigard High Student Body President and Unity Day organizer Sarah Gentry is first.
Hi, my name is Sarah. Thank you for having me here today. So this past year, I walked down the hallway at school during my first period class, and I had absolutely no hall pass and my hood up, two things that are obviously not allowed at Tigard. I walked past 3 security guards, and none of them said one word to me, even though I was obviously breaking 2 rules. A Hispanic student was then walking behind me with a hall pass and no hood up, breaking no rules. The 3 security guards proceeded to stop him and immediately asked him where he was going and why he was out of class, even though he had a hall pass. Later during my 4th period class, I'm on release, and so I go to the library to study. I was sitting at a table, and I watched one of our security guards go up to every single table in the library and ask them why they were there, and often made them leave, except he completely skipped mine. He literally walked right by my table at least 5 times and said nothing, compared to my friend Jonathan, and he was asked to leave the library every single week when he went there on his release. I've never been asked to leave the library in my 4 years at Tigard High School. I was at school last week putting up posters on the side of the building, literally vandalizing the property of the school, and a security guard walks by and continues to say absolutely nothing. Not being questioned by the people that are supposed to be on our side and protect us should not be a privilege. Being allowed to study in our library should not be a privilege. Being able to put Black Lives Matter posters on the school should not be a privilege. Walking in the hallway without having to be worried that a security guard harasses you should not be a privilege. Yet in TTSD, these are all privileges. I've had the privilege of being late to class and not being yelled at to hurry up. Because of the color of my skin, I have the privilege of walking the hallways whenever I want, getting to study in our library, and never once being publicly yelled at for breaking a rule. Our white students get to sit in the comfort of this privilege, while the other 40% of our students are not protected and constantly harassed by our own security guards at Tigard High School. I have these privileges, and I'm even noticing that there's a problem. That should be a huge indicator that we absolutely need change in TTSD. Next up is our Tigard-Tualatin president, Matthew Brown.
Hi, everybody. An important question we've gotten this whole time is why now? Why are we just now addressing issues that our POC and Black students have brought to us countless times before? And to answer that, we have to recognize that we are in an unprecedented moment. People all around the country are finally listening. And it's easy in these situations to close the curtains on what's happening around the world and pretend like it's not happening here. However, people are marching, people are awake, people are signing petitions and donating time and money to the effort in waves we've never seen before. Right now, everyone is listening, and our community is looking for responsive leadership. And if we don't pass this resolution, our community will remember how when everybody in the world was talking about race, our school stayed silent. Students will translate it in the feeling that conversations about race are not appropriate in schools. Teachers will question their ability to start conversations in the classrooms that seek to connect and educate. Our marginalized community members will worry if our schools are the sanctuaries for their kids that we say they are. We were the first school district in the state to respond to the previous crisis. We took swift action to protect our students and staff without a blink of an eye. And now we need to take action again to respond to the next crisis. We need to be meeting the moment by recognizing that we are late and acting in response to our own failures. And this is not a new problem, but it's new that everybody is listening. And there's a window of opportunity for you to make a bold statement about who we are as TTSD, and in turn inspire our neighboring school districts to now be a part of the solution. Now I'm going to hand it off to Kaviv, my co-president for the TTSU.
Hi, everyone. Recently, there's been a quote circulating around social media. In a racist society, it is not enough to be non-racist. We must be anti-racist. But what exactly does that mean? Anti-racism isn't just making a statement condemning racism. Anti-racism is an ongoing practice of identifying, challenging, and changing the value structures and behaviors that perpetuate racism. On a personal level, that doesn't mean just not using racial slurs yourself, but it means speaking up when you hear them in the halls or in the workplace. And on the district level, that doesn't mean simply putting out a statement condemning racism, but to proactively take steps toward dismantling systemic racism right here in our own district. This includes academic and behavioral disparities that disproportionately impact students of color. It includes working to combat student-to-student microaggressions in the hallways and classrooms, teachers and staff treating students differently based on race, pay-to-play fees disproportionately barring students of color from extracurricular participation, and a workforce that doesn't match the demographics of our school district, and teachers of color who are being hired but not retained, and a curriculum that tells a Eurocentric tale, not of students like myself. Now, we understand this resolution isn't going to magically solve any of these problems, but it does make a commitment to students, parents, teachers, and community members that we recognize these problems and the district will be actively working to fix them. I know there's a lot to do, but we aren't being unrealistic in our ask. It is such a big problem in TTSD that Matthew, Sarah, and I will never step foot in TTSD schools again as students, but we are willing to put in the work to make this happen. As a school board, it is your job to set and meet the standard for our district. I really hope you pass this resolution, and next up is Tigard High BSU President and TTSU Vice President Abdi.
Hello, everybody. Before I start, I want everyone to close their eyes for a second. Just close your eyes. I know it sounds weird, but just close your eyes. And picture that you're me. Nigga, monkey, cotton picker, nigger, and slave. These are the words that I have been called in the hallway, during class, in the library, at a football game, by my fellow classmates. Right now, you know that feeling of shock when you heard it, or that awkward feeling of not even knowing what to feel? That's what me and other students of color feel every single day. I have been talking about hate speech since my freshman year. And I think Amber and Zinnia remember my sophomore year. We used to have like equity meetings together. I can't keep waiting. It has been enough time, and I have a little sister coming to Tigard High School next year, and I have a little brother going into his sophomore year, and they shouldn't have to deal with that. Our job as students is to come to school in a safe environment and learn, and your job as a district is to provide that. I have done my part, and now I'm asking you as a district to please do yours. Thank you.
So I think next we're going to read the resolution out loud so everyone can hear it. But before we do that, I just want to say thanks to you guys.
So Ben, I'll let you, I don't know, students, if you wanted to read it, Ben, if you were wanting to read that, I'll let you move forward. But I also, I'm going to give just a second to board members just to acknowledge, thank you to ditto what Ben said, that I also feel it's just an opportunity to let Sharon, Karen, or Jill say anything before we move forward.
Well, I just want to thank the students for voicing your experience and personal experiences are really helpful for us. I also want to thank you for taking the time to put this together. You've obviously been busy with the petition and everything. We do listen, and this is important to us, so we appreciate it. I also wanted to thank you because it's easy to have a I'm out of here attitude. And just kind of leave it there and say I'm gone and somebody else's issue. So I appreciate you not checking out with one more week of school left before graduation, and being concerned about this and bringing it to our attention. So thank you.
Yes, thank you very much to our graduates who have been willing to continue the work that they started and want to see finished. And also specifically to Abdi for saying his story again so that we could hear it again and do something with it. Thank you, Auntie.
I just wanted to reiterate, thank you, Abby. Thank you to all the students. We hear you. I mean, as a white woman of privilege, I hear you, and I'm deeply moved, and I want to fix it. That's all. I don't want you guys ever be scared in school.
All right, I will jump into the resolution and then hand it back to Maureen. Tigard-Tualatin School District 23J, Draft Resolution 1920-19, condemning racism and committing to being an anti-racist school district. Whereas George Floyd, a 46-year-old Black man, Breonna Taylor, a 26-year-old Black woman, and Ahmaud Arbery, a 25-year-old Black man, were killed over the last several months as the latest victims of racism and police violence. And whereas mass protesting is taking place all across the country, as people are refusing to remain silent or complacent about racial injustice, and decades of systemic oppression and abuses have reached a tipping point. And whereas systemic racism and racial oppression have long led to physical, political, legal, economic, and environmental harm on people of color in the United States and Oregon specifically, and whereas the Tigard-Tualatin School District has worked to be a leader on educational equity over the last several years, with initiatives including operationalizing and implementing a collective equity framework, establishing pillars for equity to critically analyze our current system, policies and practices in collaboration with stakeholder groups, processes for equitable decision-making, supporting student affinity groups, and building equity teams. But we also recognize that the district has not done enough to combat racism or proactively teach anti-racism. And as a result, our students of color, and Black students in particular, still regularly experience racism in our schools. And whereas in less than 24 hours, a petition demanding a hate speech policy be adopted in the Tigard-Tualatin School District has received over 750 signatures. And whereas incidents of racism are not just happening in other parts of the United States, they're happening right here. Racial disparities in social, health, economic, legal, and academic outcomes exist in Oregon, and they exist in Tigard-Tualatin, King City, and Durham. And whereas students, parents, and community members in our district have consistently reported, including at TTSD listening sessions, experiencing and witnessing racism and hate speech in our schools. Now, therefore, be it resolved on this 8th day of June 2020 by the Board of the Tigard-Tualatin School District that the district condemns racism, racial violence, white supremacy, hate speech, and bigotry in all forms inside and outside of our schools, and the district will work to be actively anti-racist and dismantle systemic racism in our schools and empower people of color, and the district commits to adopting a hate speech policy prior to the start of the 2020-2021 school year that is responsive to the students, parents, and staff who have shared their experiences and perspectives over the last year, and the district affirms the value and importance of curriculum that represents the diversity of our community, state, and country, and accurately honors the contributions of historically marginalized communities. And we acknowledge our current curriculum does not achieve that. We commit to using an equity lens for all future curriculum adoptions as required in board policy. And the district believes that having a diverse faculty and staff reflective of the demographics of our students provides significant value to students of color and all students, and will continue to work towards a more diverse workforce. All right, Maureen, I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah. Ben, thank you. Thank you for reading that. And actually, I'm going to hand it right over to Zinnia to help us facilitate through this process of discussion. So thank you, Zinnia.
Thank you. So the next part, for those of you that read into the space your commitment of what we're going to be doing as part of the Art of Community, we would like you to engage in the protocol of our first thought. The first thought is the first thing that came to your mind given the content that was just read to you around the resolution that Director Bowman had read and the students had presented to us. One thing that we would like to highlight as part of that prompt is what was going on in your head and in your heart as you heard from students as they presented the resolution and what you felt and what you thought as Director Bowman read the statement. So at this time, we will facilitate that by just going alphabetical. So I will be calling your name as for you to share your first thoughts. Okay, Abdi?
I have to work on this. So my first thoughts, it's a start. I always think of things as being there's a starting place, and I feel like this is that starting place. So yeah, that's my first thought.
And thank you for modeling that. So your first thought is a phrase, a sentence, and so forth. So Alfonso.
My first thought is of an experience in my senior year in high school and not starting the affinity group. We didn't have anything like that back then, and just a lot of appreciation for the seniors here who really worked hard during their senior year to make a difference. So just a thought of appreciation.
Amber.
So I'd say in my head right now is appreciation for the process that transpired to get here. I appreciate the hard conversations, the intense conversations, and the humility and honesty that it required to get to this point and to this draft. And my heart is in a really vulnerable space. I want to appreciate you, Abdi. You're making space for my children too. So as not only an employee, but a parent in this system, and as a Black family in this system. It will hopefully look different for them.
Director Bowman, Ben?
Feeling really emotional, feeling a sense of personal failure in all of this, but hopeful that we'll be making progress.
Carol?
Sorry, I'm mostly in the feeling space. I'm very moved by the students. Each one of you said something that hit my heart, and feeling heavy and thinking about what kind of commitments I can personally make to move the work forward.
Darren?
Yeah, I think similar to what Storm said, it's probably emotional right now. I think just, again, I'm excited and proud that we're at the point where we're at now and that we're moving forward. Reflecting back, there's always a what ifs, what if we done it sooner, things like that. So just kind of in that space right now. But I really appreciate all the hard work and hard conversations that have taken us to the place that we're at today.
David?
I'm impressed with the student leaders bringing forward the resolution and showing courage on behalf of their student colleagues in the district. That's what I'm thinking in my head. In my heart, I'm a little saddened that it's taken action by the students in lieu of action ahead of time by the adult leaders in our district.
Debbie?
So very emotional right now. My first thoughts are, around just how brave the students are and how impressed I am with their willingness to, share both from the white privilege side and a student of color side, and how different that looks within our system. And as your HR director, I hear over and over, about the importance of our staff looking like our students, and I just want to work so hard to make that happen.
Margie?
My head is very grateful that we started the process early, and we, thanks to the pushing of the students, are not dropping it. My heart, very grateful and very impressed with the sensitivity and perspective that Sarah brings into this conversation. So thank you for doing that, Sarah. Thank you, Abdi, for once again sharing the pain that you've gone through, and that many of us have seen. And again, thanking you students for pushing us and not letting us be complacent or function at a snail's pace, to know that this is the time and we should once again be a great leader for this state, for this matter.
Matt?
First thought is that this is the time for this. I feel huge amounts of appreciation for the students that put this together, and I challenge our whole community to move forward with it. I feel like it's time.
My first thought goes to my heart, and it says, I'm just incredibly proud of this student. I'm just amazed how Abby is using his own pain to be able to do something that we are all guilty of in so many ways. Not always personally, but maybe something we're acting right away because we don't know what to do sometimes. And Sarah exposing the huge weakness we have in our security system at our high school, to her privilege, and be able to bring in that light to what our students of color go every single day, like she mentioned, and just an immense amount of gratitude for taking the time to listen now and use this horrible situation that is happening in our nation to make a change to what is the closest to us, which are our students, which are our future.
Harvey? Harvey, if you're talking, you're on mute. Okay, Harvey, we'll come right back to you. Kabir?
I'm glad we're finally to where we are now, to the point where we're having this conversation at a board meeting, and have a resolution to make a commitment to do that. I don't know, Abdi's speech really touched me. I closed my eyes like everyone else, and I don't know, I feel emotional right now, and I'm just excited that we have the opportunity to finally make change.
Lisa? Lisa Haswige?
I'm feeling really grateful for the students coming forward. Thank you, Abdi. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Kabi, for being vulnerable with us and sharing what it's like. I grew up in this district as well, so my mind is going like, can we do better? And I appreciate the push that we're getting. I wish that it was before now, but I'm also still grateful that work is going to move forward as well. So thank you guys for being brave and vulnerable with us.
Dr. McCall?
My first thoughts is that the urgency and hearing student voices and recognizing that we're not there yet where we want to be, and that we need to get there. For the students who are graduating, I share an affinity. My youngest son is graduated or just graduated too, and I had thought by now that our educational system as a whole would have produced more equitable outcomes for students, for all students, particularly for students that look like me. And it really touched me because I started kindergarten 50 years ago, and I see that our students are still going through things that I clearly and vividly remember happened as a kindergarten. So thank you.
I think, and I mentioned this in my little speech a few minutes ago about how it's easy for us to pretend like these things don't happen here. And it is really easy. We have the privilege of living in a cozy suburb that hides us away from a lot of the things that are happening around the world. But what we forget is that everybody pays attention. Everybody knows what's going on. It's these things are happening, and I'm thankful that it took. I am disappointed that it took this for people to pay attention, but I'm glad that people are paying attention now, and that we have an opportunity here to leave behind a better TTSD than what me, Kavi, Abdi, and Sarah started with. And I'm sad that it took what's happening across the world for us to pay attention, but it makes me feel hopeful that when I'm out of here, that things are going to start getting better and things are going to look better. And there's going to be more opportunity for kids that look like me and speak like the rest of my family to be able to speak up about things they care about and be able to speak out when they hear things in the hallway that confuse them or harm them. And I think this resolution is the starting ground for that we know it's not perfect, but at least it's somewhere to start with so that we can make it better in the future if we need to. We can adapt if we have to. But at least it's a starting ground for work that we're late on starting.
Maureen?
I was just thinking about what Matt was sharing. Two things quickly. To the students, Kavi and Matt and Sarah, your passion, and I know what will be your accountability to us to ensure this work keep moving forward. I'm grateful for, and what will stay in my head a long time is Sarah's experience and observations as opposed to Opti's that he just shared. And I don't think that anyone can just lead that. It's just, so I'm just sitting with that a lot. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Octavia?
I'll first say that I'm a little bit embarrassed as an adult to have these children use their voices in order to enact change in the district that it should have happened a long time ago. So I'm grateful that you guys spoke up. Thank you for that. Because I was a child in these hallways, so I do understand. And I think that's where my connection comes from, because those words were used when I was there. So I appreciate your guys' voices, and I appreciate the stance that you guys stand here as students for TTSD. So thank you.
Patty?
Well, I had to write down what I wanted to say because I get nervous. And I am just in awe of our students, and I so appreciate them and how courageous they are just being here and addressing this topic. Thank you.
All right, and my apologies, I skipped a whole row, so I'm going to go back to Jarvis. Jarvis?
I forgive you, Zinnia. My first thoughts actually resonate with what the kids were saying, because it brought back just personal experiences when I was in school, similar to other people have said. And just briefly, it reminded me of an affinity group that I was part of in middle school, which was kind of nice to have a support group then. And then another thing that hit me after reading the resolution was that as a leader, I feel like I need to take a better responsibility of making my staff look like our students.
Jill?
My first thought is also just tremendous thanks to the students for your courage in speaking up this evening.
Martine?
Yes. So first of all, thank you to Abdi and all of our students for giving us firsthand account of their life within the school. It takes definitely a lot of courage. So thank you for that. For me, I think my first thought again is making sure that I look into my own personal biases and evaluate myself and what kind of work I have to do personally, so that we can make sure that we're serving our most vulnerable students and our students of color in the best way possible.
Karen?
When it was being read out loud, I was struck by the boldness of the language. There's no question of what's being said. Other districts that read it or anybody else who reads it isn't going to wonder what we were trying to say. It says it. And like Martine said, reminds me that I must continue my journey too.
Rob?
On first thought, I echo what some people have said about feeling a sense of failure, disappointment. It never ever should have taken these senseless murders of Black Americans for people to realize how big of an issue this is. We're all guilty of having turned a blind eye to that far too long. That's not the first time that I've heard Abdi give that speech, but every single time he gives it, it's incredibly powerful, and it does fill me with a sense of responsibility and sadness, which is what's necessary right now. And with that being said, I'm incredibly proud to work with these students. I know, Matt, I haven't had the privilege of working with you closely since you're over at Tualatin, but I can tell you from the conviction of your words that your school and your community is lucky to have you. And then working with Sarah, Kavi, and Abdi all year closely with Unity Day, I can't express how grateful I am for the work that you three have put in and want to continue to put in. And it's an incredible testament to who you are as individuals and people that you're willing to sit before us and really put us in our place and tell you what you need from us, as our students. And so I'm incredibly filled with pride, and I'm proud to be a part of a district that will listen to you. And I want to be proud to be a part of a district that will act based on what you all have said here.
Sarah?
I would reiterate, I'm really disappointed that after Unity Month at both schools and almost Unity Days at both schools and going to 5 hate speech listening sessions, it took 3 people getting murdered for our district to finally have a resolution and make change. But I think in that same stroke, I'm hopeful that we'll actually have change at our high schools.
Scott?
First thought is frustration. Our district claims to be an equity district and put that in the foremost part of their thought process of doing things. I understand the intricacies of making resolutions and deciding which ones you will go with. This is a slam dunk. This should have unanimous approval by the board. My heart is angered. Abdi, none of those things should ever have been said to you in the hallway without somebody being called out for what they said. It should not exist. And I'm going to tell you right now that the apprehension around not passing this is rooted in white privilege. And we have that in our community to the nth degree. There was a protest down the street on Borland, and it was part of the community. And the HOA came back and told the protesters that were organizing it, historically, we've been a white privileged community. And you're going to have to make a decision, and it's going to make people upset, and it's going to be uncomfortable. And what I would say with my anger on that is having 2 small children are going to go in this district. No one should be able to say the things that have been said to students in our hallways, period, without exception. And this district claims to be a district of equity. Well, then take a stand and be equitable right now. That's my heart.
Sharon?
Well, I'm sad because I thought we were on a roll in February in terms of the SIA work we did and all the listening sessions, the statement that we approved in February. And then we had the COVID, which took really a lot of the energy of the district just to respond to that. I guess if there is, I hate to call it a silver lining, but I hope a good outcome of all this is that there is so much awareness now because of the tragedy that happened to these individuals, this injustice, that it's raised the level of awareness. So now all the work that the district's been doing will have people pay attention and have a tighter hold on everybody so we can continue this work and make progress.
Susan?
I am all over the place, but I think a variety of things. The perspective of the students and of the staff that have shared in this process, I'm very grateful for, and I think we need to use this as a model for other conversations that we have and just the value of multiple perspectives. I'm saddened, embarrassed, I'm not sure which is the right word, that in our business, we are here to protect and to educate kids, and it took students to bring this to our attention. So I think we have an opportunity there. As far as the resolution, I know there'll be further conversation about it. I think what I appreciate about it is the commitment to some action. I think we've been talking about it, and I'm somewhat thankful that we started this conversation well before what's happened in recent weeks. It makes me feel proud to be part of the district, but I also think we have a lot of soul searching to do. I feel guilt and frustration, but I think these conversations, the more we can have them and the broader our perspectives and having those conversations, I think we'll be better off. So I think it's much bigger than this group though. And I think that is, to me, fearful about how to get that done.
Dr. Sue?
My head is immensely grateful to our students. It is from your lived experience that will move this work forward. And I am grateful for your courage, and I am grateful for this work that you have done relative to the resolution. I consider the work that we've done over the last 2 years, which has been focused to the adults with the intent of making the lived experience for you different. And clearly there's a gap that still exists. And so my heart is filled both with incredible anger that we have not yet been able to help every adult in this system understand the impact that it has on our students. My heart is filled with a great sense of overwhelming burden to move this district forward. I felt it a year ago, almost 2 years ago now, when I came in as a superintendent, and I looked at the achievement data, and I walked the halls of our schools, and I saw children passed over. I clearly remember the first time I sat with a Black student in one of our elementary schools and watched the teacher pass over him, not once, not twice, but 3 times. And the immense sense of both anger and disappointment, and then questioning about why is that? What has our system done that has allowed that to happen? And what do I need to do as both a leader and as a colleague to improve that? So great sense of burden to close that lived experiential gap. So again, my gratitude, my thanks, and my thanks to everyone who's here, to all of our partners, because our students are crying out, and it's time that we answered that. So thank you.
Tim Blackburn.
Thank you. My heart is full of gratitude for all of the students and for your perspective that you shared with us this evening. And I think that I feel well, frankly, I feel awful that I've never been made to feel that way in my life, and I can't imagine how painful that is. And so when I think about in my head what I'd like to do, it's turning actively anti-racist policy into practice. I'm thinking a lot about my hands, I guess, and what I can do now as a colleague to help make the experience of our students better.
Tim?
After listening to the students talk about their experience, my feelings were sadness and shame that we're still at this point. What progress has been made is clearly not enough. The students also have provided me and all the protests and demonstrations around the country and around the world have given me some sense of hopefulness. It's so unfortunate that things that seem so right take such a long time to materialize and to become up people's lives. So it's that part of there's that frustrating part, but again, it's the hopefulness that we can make progress out of such a horrible situation is where I would like to see things go, that we all make this something real in our lives.
Todd?
Yeah, absolute gratitude for not only our students, but everybody sitting here tonight. So appreciate hearing your stories and being allowed to take that in, your perspectives. And so I appreciate that greatly. Just a range of emotions, not only over the week, but over the course of my own lifetime, just going through these emotions. I guess where I go to is, the hands and where, what we can do from this day forward and continue down the path of making change and being in the positions that we are to do that. And as the adults in our kids' lives. So in my mind, first thoughts are about action.
Tracy?
I have been reflecting on our hate speech work session, where we heard the very same things from other students, younger students, about what was happening in the hallway and what is overlooked or continues to go on. And I know that I've seen this, our leadership be bold this year, and in the conversations that we've had in the Student Success Act process, as well as being the first to understand that we needed to close our schools. And so I have a lot of I feel like we owe our students that proof. We need to show them that we are listening, not tell them that we're listening, but show them that we're listening, and this is our opportunity.
Veronica? Veronica, if you're talking, you're on mute.
I've been trying to write down, but about all I want to say, but I can't. It's too much to write down. My heart has taken over my head. I want to thank everyone for allowing these students space to speak their mind. I got transferred, and I'm going to say this, and I say it repeatedly. I got transferred from Tigard High School to a different elementary school as an employee about 12 years ago. because I spoke up for my students of color as a MICHA advisor. So hearing as an employee this issue has not changed. Not only emotionally hits me hard, but I can't put it in my head, how come it has to take students to teach teachers instead of teachers to teach students? All this that's going on. I've had posters that I've seen at Pirate High School when I was there with the word wetback on it. I've had, as an employee, spoken out to not speak, only when spoken to, and as a person of color and a parent, always be in the back, not able to express what I want to say. And enough is enough. And I'm going to say it that, Dr. Sue, I asked you a long time ago, and I'm going to ask you again, what is it that you're going to do that the other two superintendents before you didn't do? A lot of change has to be made, and it's not right that students have to speak after more than 12 years, something that has been going on for a while, for us to open our eyes. And I do see that progress, but very little has been made. And it's hurtful to me to see as a parent that I went through this with one child and I have two more still to go through this, and hear issues from a 9-year-old daughter that she being judged speaking Spanish in the classroom. So my heart is taking over my mind, and I just hope that what Abby said not only stays here, but also stays in here. Because what the words of the students is what is going on and what needs to be changed. Thank you.
Harvey, if you wanted to try again. Oh, I think he left. What's going on in my heart is a lot of heaviness and a lot of, I think just like what everybody had said around the weight of this, as well as the feeling embarrassed that we haven't done more. As a staff of color, fighting for equity for the last 2 decades across different districts, but specifically here, the last 8 years, has been a lot of frustration as well. And standing up, supporting students in predominantly white school system has shown me a lot of push-up for our staff of color. But I've also seen a lot of my colleagues here today that have been standing up and supporting our students. And what I do know about anti-racist work and equity work is that it takes all of us, all the time, always. So what I know to be true is that students standing up the way that you have from the moment we did our equity and our hate speech, you all have lived your head, heart, and hands. You closed that loop. You came in, you listened, and you acted. So my hope is that let it be known that today, as everybody has been able to share their response, how it has hit their head, how it has hit their heart, how are we going to act moving forward? And shame on us if we spent this time to hear and not make a change. So I want to offer that time and space now back to Maureen Wolf, and I wanted to remind us the reason why we use these protocols is very similar to the art of a community. It takes all of us in this community to make that change, all of us. So being able to hear with one another, share with one another the vulnerabilities, the shame, the guilt, and move that to action is something that we have to do as a community. So I want to offer that back to Maureen. Thank you for doing this, having this conversation and allowing space for this process.
Well, Zinnia, thank you, and thank you all. It seems like such a hard segue to being 5:59. So if you all will hang in a few more minutes just to kind of wrap up in terms of, so procedurally, this is an action item, which will be on the action part of the agenda. But more specifically, Dr. Sue and Zinnia, maybe you can help me with this. What I appreciate about this resolution, as Director Emerson said, it really is specific in language that I would say that we haven't necessarily always articulated. This resolution also specifies action steps. Is what do we want our hands to be doing in terms of the hate speech policy, as well as how we think about, we have system curriculums, but are there opportunities, to really engage in authors that maybe haven't been lifted up and really honored and supported in our classrooms. So I think there's some really important things to find in this, and that's one piece I greatly appreciate. So Dr. Sue, with this, I will kind of move to you in terms of the fact that we're at 6:01, and with the kind of action, I think we're all walking away. As Rob pointed out, I can see Rob on my screen. So Scott, I think if all of you saw the question he asked, Zinnia, this is where I'll help you. I mean, there are a lot of us, so if you're all willing to hang in here for a few more minutes, we can try to, I don't think anyone, my sense of next step or how people are feeling as part of my process was listening to the heart and the head is what I anticipated as the hands. But Scott, I appreciate the note. And so Zinnia, as a process, person, what do you think is appropriate? We hang in here for another 15 minutes. This is really critical and important information. Board members, if I'm seeing nods, and give everybody a quick moment to give their next thoughts. Clearly the action happens at, during the action part of the agenda. That's on the board's responsibility. So I'll be quiet. I'm kind of thinking out loud, if you will. But Dr. Sue, I'll also look to you if you have a thought.
I do. Zinnia, could you go back, please, to the resolution? And take us to the section relative to the deliverables, if you will. Now be it resolved. I think that might be I'm now in my head space, that this would be a place to maybe get some more information about what does that look like and who does it involve. So if we are going to say that we're going to commit to adopting a speech policy, to learn together, to respond, and to develop a system, as we talked about earlier this week, or last week actually, there is a gap in practice. We've been doing a great deal of work over the last 2 years with our admin around equity, protocols, and more importantly, what it means to live that experience. Director Fields has helped us understand that. John Lassen and Tara have helped us understand that and continue to work with our understanding around that. And yet the gap in practice persists. And so to that question, all three of those are rightly called out, and I thank the students for that. But each one of those has a given responsibility and need to learn and to do differently and to practice doing differently. So I'm interested from the students' perspective and from staff's perspective, what are the next steps? To your question, Veronica, what am I going to do as your superintendent? I need to hear what the training needs are. I need to hear what the support needs are. And then I will work with cabinet and with all of you and others who are willing to come to the table, just like we did with the SIA work, to understand how we are going to reallocate budgetary resources to make that happen in the coming year and move us in that direction. But without some specific deliverables, this task is impossible. So I am listening at this point in terms of striving to be that community that lives in care and to learn from others so that I can listen better and know what the next steps are? What are those pieces? Help me understand that. Sarah, I'm looking right at you, my dear. Unfortunately, you're in the bottom of my left-hand box here. So I'm going to start with you. From a student's perspective, what do you believe, you and Kavi and Matt and Abdi, what do you believe your peers need? What do they need from you? What do they need from us? What do they need to close this gap?
I think, like in the resolution says, like, I think we need a hate speech policy because we've had, I've been to 3 hate speech lessons at the district. I haven't even gotten to go to all of them. We made Unity Month come together as well as Unity Day, which showed that like our school is ready for this change. Our students have spoke up and said we need this change and we need it now. And I think the hate speech policy is going to give us something concrete to move off of, because it's going to give teachers like a protocol to follow. Because right now, when I hear people say the N-word in the hallways, the teacher can do anything from completely ignore it, which is about 99% of the time, or actually say something, which is 1% of the time. And most of the time what they say is they're like super unprepared and they don't know how to respond to the situation. Coming from our district, our superintendent and our school board, we need a concrete hate speech policy that's going to do something in our schools. And I know that we have a ton of equity work happening at the higher levels, but like, and we have all the like equity with our families and all this stuff, but it's like, it's not making any difference in our schools. So we need a hate speech policy, and we need it by the fall. Like, students are walking in the hallway every day, not protected by our teachers and not protected at all under our school policies right now, which I think is absolutely baffling. And so like, we need that, and we need it now. And then that's going to 100% springboard the conversation. Like, we're going to have Unity Day. We're going to have a whole school-wide day where students are going to get educated. And it's going to be completely student-run next year if coronavirus doesn't happen again. And like, we're going to have these things, but like, we need that hate speech policy. We need it by September. And that's a very tangible action item that can happen. And we've gathered a ton of information from the community this past year. So it's like, how do we use that then and actually put in something concrete? Like, it's not going to be perfect, and that's the fact of it, and it's going to need to be amended. But it's like, we need to do something, and we need to just put something in place by fall that has a bunch of different perspectives coming at it, but we need it, and we need it now.
So Sarah, let me peel back another layer here. Policy in and of itself does not change hearts. What you're talking about truly is a process, the AR that backs up the policy. And that's where my question stands. What do I need to do in terms of leveraging resources and providing additional training and opportunities for learning so that the teachers that you say are not responding understand that they, number one, have their backs protected when they speak up, and number two, that there are ways to actions that can be taken. What do we need to provide? What conditions do we need to provide to support the policy? You can write the policy tomorrow. The board and I and many on this call have had that conversation. But policy in and of itself, again, I say it again, does not change hearts and minds. Even procedures that say, thou shalt do it this way, doesn't change hearts and minds. So I need to understand what resources, what training, what opportunities need to be provided in the coming year. And I'm committed to doing that will really start to move that dial. The board can write a policy, we can write a process, but I need to know what needs to back up that process.
Dr. Sue, I'm going to jump in for a second, and Sarah, I'm going to have you reflect on that for a second, because Abdi, and I want you to jump in too. I want to offer up, we have a lot of teachers on this call, and well, Sarah.
I'm going to offer up into that. Sue, I hear exactly what you're saying and what conditions, and there is how do you judge what's going on and how a teacher does it. I think it's a little unfair to Sarah to be able to say right now she would understand the conditions of that being a high school student. I would say where the conditions would come into play, knowing that they've got their back, that when a teacher hears a racial slur and they write a letter of referral, they send the kid to the office, that kid's going to get in trouble. And right now, when it comes to teachers in this district, whether it be this issue or a lot of other issues, they don't know if there's going to be consequences. And I understand the historic need to shift from the discipline model that overwhelmingly punished people of color across everything. But it's a tightrope walk, because once you say we're not going to punish anybody, you open the floodgates to everybody that wanted to say something that we would not approve of wholeheartedly as a society. And so,
no, I captured that, Scott, and I think that that's the.
Can I hear Sarah? I want.
So Abdi has been very polite and had his hand up so I'd like Abdi to speak. And then Sarah, and then truly I'd like to circle back to some other teachers. I'm just watching Rob kind of reflect on this because he's in my screen. But Abdi, go ahead.
So 2 years ago, it's like a year and a half ago, when I was thinking about this stuff, I was thinking that there's always going to be the conversation that comes down to how are you going to change people? That's what it really is. Like Dr. Sue, when you said that we can write as many policies as you want, but we have to actually change people. So with the student section, I knew that students oftentimes use the excuse of saying, I didn't know what I was saying meant. Okay, so what we did was we literally created Unity Day for students to know what that meant. So later on, when they try to use that excuse of saying, I didn't know what I meant, they're like, wait, didn't we just have a whole school day about this stuff? That's getting rid of that excuse. So on the student half, we have Unity Day. That's how we change students. When it comes to teachers and when it comes to staff, that is not our job as students to fix. I'm willing to help you. I'm willing to do whatever you like. I'm willing to do whatever you need me to do. But when it comes to teachers, teaching to teachers, and when it comes to staff, that is not my job as a student to fix. I have helped with the students, but further than that, I don't know the teachers, I don't know the staff. So what can we do in this situation?
And Abdi, I appreciate that. That gives me a great deal of clarity. Thank you.
So Maureen, I just wanted to go back to why we did the protocol that we did, because it's important, because the folks that were invited into the space represented a cross section of stakeholders. And so that's why it's important for all of us to hear from one another what's going on in our heads and what's going on in our hearts, as well as how we're going to be held accountable for making those statements and the actions that we take. So the next steps, immediate steps, would be for going back to who does what. So given the resolution, the next step would be my assumption, right? And please correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. McCall, but it would be the board would be creating a vote on whether they see that the resolution is passed. The other parts of it, and I would like to offer this to Dr. Sue, is that, to honor what Abdi said, that is not his responsibility, nor is it the students to teach teachers. And believe it or not, we actually have a lot of staff here, including myself and a few other staff here that know how to do a lot of this work because we've been doing it for a while. We just have not had the mainstream support of all of our administrators and board members and so forth. So my recommendation is that conversation is part of how we will operationalize what this resolution means. We need to bring those that we know what to do and amplify their voice to be able to do that work. The other part of this is, for me, as an equity coordinator, as well as those leading this work for our staff and families and bringing in our community members, I need a resolution or I need a statement where I can go out there and amongst my white staff and my white colleagues know that if I say that this is what's happening, I will not get brushed off or I will not be told that I'm not welcome here, because as a staff of color, I've been trying to fight this for a while. And it's been my colleagues that either have asked me to be quiet or have asked me not to speak up. So that's what I need from the board. That's what I need from administrators. And that's what I need from everybody. So if we can start with the first micro response, as we saw in our head, heart, hand, is the first step that we need is for folks to pass this resolution and for us to then convene our stakeholders as we have here to really set down those next steps.
And Sonia, I appreciate that. And I wholeheartedly agree. My purpose in trying to get to some of the other was to understand as we move into that space, how to make those moves. And again, what does that look like to the members who are here and to others? So as we continue this work, we can do a better job of making that visible and be more clear as to the work that we are doing and the impact that it is or isn't having.
Abdi, go ahead.
Again, one thing I also want to add on is that this is a resolution, not a policy. the reason behind it being a resolution is having accountability. Now we can say, if we're not doing the right thing, I can come back and I can say, you guys promised me that you guys would have this done, but you guys didn't. So it's an accountability thing too. So we should also understand that.
So I realize I keep thinking about Scott's point. I do feel that in the last few minutes, right, this has been a really, I think we accomplished it gets messy sometimes, but I think this was a genuine opportunity for people to give their thinking, certainly observe the desire to make this happen, the challenges to get it, from the hallways all the way through. I just appreciate, Zinnia, just your leadership and your thoughtfulness around process and advocacy on how we make this actually work. So I think it is 6:15. I think the critical action tonight is to my fellow board members that we pass this resolution. And then from there, it's not a resolution that's just filed in our 2019-20 resolution stack, that we continue to make this a breathing document, that what are the next steps that we do to hold ourselves accountable and move this work forward. And I believe Margie just asked a question, and I'm going to leave the district commits to the prior start of 2021, and the details of that behind we will follow up on. But I feel like that is enough of a timeline commitment for this evening. I'm going to thank you all. I have, as you all are, I'm sure, having a lot race through our heads. And I just appreciate the honesty and the passion, the anger, and the sense of urgency that we all are feeling, that we want to do the right thing and move forward. I think Tim Manley said, why is it that the right things seem like it takes so long? And I hear you all, but I do want to honor that we're supposed to shift gears at 6:30. So for those of us returning for a board meeting, this conversation for the purpose of passing a resolution, I think is complete, but that really opens a door to what this actually means in terms of the action items included in the resolution. And I think with that, unless someone has a real sense of, but I have a 10-second comment I want to make, and anyone has a right to do that. You need to unmute yourself to do so. Okay. Again, large group, 37 of us sitting here trying to make this work. So Susan, what are you saying? I want to note that we have the school board, the administrators, classified license, all seemingly in agreement with the spirit of this resolution. I hope that makes making this actionable and collaborating on a future effective policy achievable. And we have students clearly leading the charge of this conversation. And you all were eloquent in your honesty and the pain that you've experienced or disappointment that you've seen. So with that, I'm going to close, because in work sessions, we do not make actions. That is for the regular meeting. Okay, you guys, I'm now just rambling because it's been a process, but I'm grateful for all of you. So with that, we're gonna, oh yeah, go ahead.
I just want to clarify then. So for those of you that would like to stay and or hear the determination of whether the resolution passes, you should watch the board meeting. Okay, and I just want to clarify that.
Yeah, and I do believe, I don't have the agenda right in front of me. I believe the resolution is the first action item, and we actually have no reports and discussions tonight. So depending on public comment, it actually should be fairly quick, I believe.
So I would recommend that those of you that really want to know the answer of what all of this was should stay for that session. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent. Okay, thank you all. And for those who return, we'll see you at 6:30.